All right, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, as always, I like to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Racha HaKodash, double honors unto the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well. Salutations to you, sincere and hopeful elect. I can push in the word of Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, in spirit and in truth. Ma'ah Arabam Arabai Alap, which is to say 144,000 in the Lashawan Kodash. Achad Shalayashim, which is to say 1/3, Bachayaryim, which is elect, and Sha'aryath, which is remnant. All right, those are the groups and categories in which Yahweh Bashem Yahushua is dealing with in these last days. So this is a video from yesterday. I'm going to just let it play and chime in here and there. So you had Scott Bessent, which is, I believe he's in charge of the Treasury, if I'm not mistaken. He pretty much on behalf of the White House, Donald Trump, put out a statement, indicating or pretty much saying that the U.S. all right, is starting an economic D-Day against Iran, okay? And, with that economic D-Day is pretty much a secondary tariffs or sanctions, secondary sanctions on Iran, being that they can't take them down via the military. So they're, starting an economic war pretty much that's going to affect the global economy. All right, all economies of the world is about to suffer to a certain degree based upon the actions that the West is about to take. And let's not forget the trade war that the U.S. has pretty much just started up again with the Canadians. Okay, so I'm gonna play some of this and grab some precepts, Lord willing.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Patrick Henningsen will be joining us in just a minute. But first, the breaking news. We have Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, on behalf of Donald Trump, launching the unprecedented, it is being called, Operation Outcast against Iran on what this day is now being called Economic D-Day.
Yeah, so they're calling it Operation Outcast. But America is the one that's about to be outcast. Okay? America is about to be outcast by all nations. All nations are going to look at this place as the forbidden zone, so to say. Okay? What the U.S. is doing is putting a target on its back, being that its own allies are being treated like enemies. So, things is progressively getting worse for Babylon the Great. Okay.
And Iran, the U.S. will enforce zero leakage approach to Iran sanctions. Trump is currently making phone calls to world leaders to cut economic ties with Iran, and countries will have a finite timeline to shut down activities identified by the Secretary of Treasury, including closing Iran's branches abroad. Now, there was an extraordinary threat made by Scott Bessent that those who facilitate any trade and quote-unquote money laundering with Iran will be completely cut off from the U.S. dollar system. Here's what Scott Bessent said.
Branch of Bank Melay must be shuttered and dark. And let me be clear, any entity that facilitates money laundering on behalf of Iran will be removed from the U.S. dollar system. The clock just started ticking.
Well, Iran has essentially smashed Donald Trump and Scott Bessent's threats, because that's what they are right now, as countries are given a so-called cure period in order to get their things together to sanction Iran. Mohammad Ghalibaf, the head of parliament in Iran, said Americans know that no one buys their bombast. The United States is not in an economic position to further restrict its relations with other countries. Iran's trading partners, both in the media and through messages sent to us, have made it clear that they don't take these statements into account anywhere. In China, which was subject to many questions by the press after Scott Bessent gave his announcement on economic detail. Said it rejects U.S. economic warfare Iran and vows to protect its own interests. Iran has gone busy threatening 40-plus tankers in the Strait of Hormuz, saying that they are on a blacklist now over alleged violations of the Strait of Hormuz. And it adds that any vessel found transferring cargo with the name ships on that list will also be added to the list.
So you got the U.S. pretty much threatening all these nations for doing business and trade with Iran. So they're saying that if you do business with Iran, you're pretty much going to be targeted. And also you got Iran saying that if you side with the West, with the U.S. and pretty much participate in what they got going on, that they're going to attack you militarily. Okay, so things is heating up, man. We're entering the fall winter time, which is convenient for these energy prices, that people are receiving. The people in the Jakes out in Gary, Indiana, said that they've received energy bills that's been 50% higher than usual. $2,000 for a damn energy bill. Paying rent twice in 1 month, pretty much. All right, so with the AI data centers, with war going on, the economy failing, which is all biblical prophecy. We know what time we're in, man. All right, we're in the end of Babylon the Great, the last days. Okay, but these actions that the U.S. is taking is going to force World War III. All right, and also, Scott Bessent, when he addressed the pretty much the nation yesterday when he gave that speech, he mentioned World War II. All right, he mentioned World War II, and he even said in the spirit of I forget the exact word, but he mentioned in that same spirit. Okay, so the U.S. is letting the global players, so to say, know that it's a spirit of war, okay, in the earth right now. So real quick, let me grab Revelation 11:14. It says, the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. Okay, so World War II, it came and it went, and World War III comes quickly. All right, it's pretty much here. Day after day, there's more and more factions and groups, and ultimately, armies and nations that's being drawn out into this Third World War. Okay, based upon the actions that the U.S. is carrying out in the earth. So real quick, let me see. So like, actually, let me, okay. So hold on, no, that's Proverbs. All right, all right. This is I'm tripping. All right. So like, bear with me. Okay. Ecclesiastes 3. So we are not in a time of, a time of peace. Okay, all the idiots that joined the military that thought they were going to be able to get a Hellcat and get their college paid for, those days is over, man. You know, those days are over. All right, this is a time of war. Okay, this is a time of war, man. So individuals us in the military should expect to get sent to the sandbox and never make it home. All right, get sent over there to the Middle East and never make it back home. All right, so Ecclesiastes 3:8, it says, let me see, hold on, let me start up a little bit. Verse 1, it says, Ecclesiastes 3:1, it says, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. Jumping down to verse 8. Okay, so everything that's done underneath the sun, okay, you got certain seasons, for certain things that happen in a proper time. Okay, so verse 8, it says a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. This is not peacetime. All right, this ain't no peace mission. You get deployed and you just keeping the peace. No, this is a time of war. Okay, which is why Scott Bessent yesterday said that in the spirit of pretty much World War II. Okay, because the time period in which he was talking about was during the time of World War II. And, what was the spirit in the earth in that time? It was a spirit of war, man. Okay, so that same spirit of war is back in the earth currently. All right, so let's play some more of this.
Now, I want to play you this. This was a few questions to Scott Bessent, one on China, which I believe shocked Scott Bessent quite dramatically.
David from Reuters. Hi, thanks, Secretary. One of the most powerful tools you have at your disposal is the ability to impose secondary sanctions on banks and financial institutions that facilitate transactions for Iran. Chinese banks have often been talked about being targeted, but we don't see any of those institutions targeted here. Is that something that is coming in this campaign, or is the very delicate trade truce with China something that could prohibit you from going that far and taking that very big step? We want to make clear here today that no one is above the reach of U.S. sanctions. That if they facilitate transactions and are part of the ecosystem that turns Iranian oil into money, into repression, they will be targeted. We find that the best way to engage with countries is through quiet diplomacy, and we are level setting with every country to tell them our expectations. We know who they are, they know who they are, so when the hammer of U.S. Treasury actions falls upon them, they will have no one to blame but themselves.
He went on to say that he doesn't.
All right, so you see they mentioned China. All right, now China is a target of the U.S., being that, through, these sanctions, they want to target China as well, because China's economy, is a strong economy. Okay, so this whole time they've been inadvertently trying to get at China by way of targeting Iran. And, when they initially did that was when they went down to Venezuela and, kidnapped Maduro. All right. And, seized their oil. A lot of that oil was being sent to China. Okay, so, the West, Donald Trump, were thinking they can cripple China by, pulling that move. All right, but China is still, doing this thing. Okay, and it's also aiding Iran with this war that's going on. Okay, so, they're trying to target the Chinese with the actions that you see them doing. Now, according to the scriptures, let's get what the scriptures say about China. All right, Asia, the East. All right, because what Asia simply means east. All right, so well, let me see. Sixteen and one. So like, let me find the exact precept. Is it 15? Here we go. All right, so I was conflating two scriptures. Second Ezra 16 and 1 and also 15 and 46. So Salakia. All right, but here we go. Here in Second Ezra 15 and verse 46, it says, "And thou, Asia, that art partaker of the hope of Babylon, thou art the glory of her person." So, Asia, spearheaded by China, they mimicked and fashioned themselves to pretty much be a spitting image of Babylon the Great. Um, I was listening to another interview with Colonel Wilkerson and Danny Harfong, and Colonel Wilkerson had mentioned the difference between China's capitalism and America's capitalism, and they're vastly different, but China's it works out more in favor for the people, in comparison to this greedy capitalistic society that's here in America. Now, those Moabites is demons too, all right, but the whole capitalistic society in itself, that's all them trying to be like America. Okay. So once again it says, "And thou, Asia, that art partaker of the hope of Babylon, and art the glory of her person, woe be unto thee, thou wretch, because thou hast made thyself like unto her, and hast decked thy daughters in whoredom." Okay, so when you see so-called Chinese people, their fantasy is to become an Edomite. They look to Esau as God. They do any and everything to please Esau, man. They even allow their daughters to marry into Edomite families. So in a lot of regards and aspects, Moab in particular, all right, or the East, Asia, the East, they've made themselves like unto America, okay. And when we're doing that, you deck your daughters and whoredom, all right. It says that they might please and glory in thy lovers, which have always desired to commit whoredom with thee. All right, so on many levels, you've always had Esau wanting to, tamper with and control and influence the East, all right, Asia, okay? It says, thou hast followed her that is hated in all her works and inventions. Therefore saith the Most High, I will send plagues upon thee, widowhood, poverty, famine, sword, and pestilence, to waste thy houses with destruction and death. And that's what's coming. So this crash out move that Donald Trump is pulling is pretty much a classic example of misery loves company. So, in the minds of them, the Esau and rulership, right, starting with the small hats, the sentiment of, if I can't rule the world, nobody can. That's what we are witnessing. We are witnessing the small hats realize that they are losing power, and they're using their attack dog, America, to crash out, on everybody. That's what's about to happen. Okay. Babylon the Great, spearheaded by the small hats, it's about to crash out because they don't want to see themselves not in rulership or the power seat. Okay. And so all these Eastern countries, Asian countries that have fashioned and made themselves pretty much what's the word I'm looking for? Copies of America, it's gonna be bad for them. Okay, because the Most High is about to send plagues, upon the world and upon those Eastern nations. All right, as I said, widowhood. Why widowhood? Because a lot of their husbands is going to be drafted. All right, taken to the military, shipped off to the Middle East, and they're gonna they're gonna die over there. Okay, they're gonna go to war and never make it back. So you're gonna have a lot of widows. The world over, and really, the Lord doing that for the men of the Lord, man. So that way, when we, Abarazazah, we be a part of that number, come down from the chariot, New Jerusalem, we gonna have the pick of the litter, man, so to say. Okay, there's gonna be a lot of women that's gonna need to get the rod of correction. All right. It says poverty, famine, sword, and pestilence to waste thy houses with destruction and death. Okay. So poverty's coming, famine's coming, sword, pestilence, and the Lord's bringing death, man, to this earth. Salvation for the elect, for the remnant, and death. Okay, war, death, pestilence, plague, famine, sword. It says in the verse 50, and the glory of thy power shall be dried up as a flower. The heat shall arise that is sent over thee. So there's not going to be a remedy to ease what Yahweh Shem Yahushua is about to bring to the east. Okay, to Asia. All right. There's not going to be any, deals that can be cut. Any quantitative easing, any money printing, any tariffs or whatever the case may be. All right, none of that is going to hinder what the Lord has prepared for that part of the planet. Okay. It says, verse 51, thou shalt be weakened as a poor woman with stripes, and as one chastened with wounds, so that the mighty and lovers shall not be able to receive thee. All right. Just how Esau loved going to Asia, Southeast Asia, China, Japan, Korea's, Cambodia, Thailand, Taiwan, Laos, Myanmar, Malaysia, all right, Indonesia, all the places like that. They about to get jacked up. Okay, those lands is about to get jacked up. Okay, and just as the heat to dry up with flour, you got a rose, and a freshly it can not even be a cut. All right, a plucked flower, or just a flower. Let a scorching hot day, record-breaking hot day, just beam on this freshly budded flower. Man, that shit gonna be dried up so quick. Okay, so the destruction that the Lord is about to bring on that region is gonna be something else, man. Okay. It says, thou shalt be weakened as a poor woman with stripes, and as one chastened with wounds, so that the mighty and lovers shall not be able to receive thee. So the Lord, is about to, really put his foot down over in the East, okay, in Asia, okay, because Asia is a continent which consists of Europe. It consists of Turkey. It consists of Germany, France, Spain, China, Mongolia, Russia. All right. So there's going to be a lot of judgment, happening, all over the planet, over in the East. But the icing on the cake ultimately is going to be here in America. All right, so let's get some more of this video.
And on blowing up the global economy. We have with us Patrick Henningsen, 21st Century Wire, independent journalist and geopolitical analyst. Patrick, thanks so much for joining me today. Wanted your reactions first to Economic D-Day, Operation Economic Outcast. And I'm just wondering who the outcast really is, Patrick, because it seems like Trump is going to be on hours of worth of calls to every single world leader trying to get them to cut off ties with Iran. Iran has said it will militarily retaliate against countries that actually participate in this, and is saying they receive many messages that they will not get any cooperation, aka the United States, with this. What's your thoughts on what's going on here? Sorry, you're muted, Patrick. I don't know if you...
Great to be with you, Danny.
Yeah,
sorry about that.
see you. No, sir.
Well, I can't say I'm surprised because I don't know how many rounds of economic pain that's been announced by this administration, and how many rounds of military pain have been announced by this administration over the last 6 months. And this is just the latest. And so I don't know what they can possibly do sanctions-wise. I mean, sure they can turn the screws on Iran and on their allies and people trading with them. I think it's pretty clear the number one target from Washington is China with this. And these things, this type of economic warfare does work over long term, but it works in diverting the flow of capital and resources, against whatever the U.S. target state is. And it certainly works in the case of Venezuela, in that it provided the military and the economic threats and pressure, provided total compliance and subservience and ultimately surrender by the Venezuelan government. But they had to kidnap their head of state to make that work. Now look at Iran. They think they can repeat that. They're not going to, they tried to kill the head of state. That had no effect whatsoever. Not to the advantage of the U.S. Quite the opposite. It galvanized the Iranian population. Okay, so that removing the head of state did not work in Iran. It had the opposite effect. Sanctions did not work.
the very punishing rounds and rounds of sanctions over decades and intensified in the last year by the Trump administration hasn't had a desired effect. Iran's trading partners and allies haven't really complied with threats of U.S. secondary sanctions, including China. China did the opposite. It invoked its own legal mechanism to not observe threats by the United States, and they'll continue to buy oil from Iran if that's what China needs, if that's what is best for Chinese interests. And there's not a lot the United States can do. They can't declare a full-blown economic war with China in order to strangle Iran. It's impossible. Increased military threats, those haven't had any effect whatsoever on Iran. So there's no expectation that any of this is going to net any.
Yeah, you see. So all the military, efforts put forth by the Trump administration to weaken, Iran has not worked. So that's why they got to take it to an economic level. Okay? They got to take it to an economic level. So, with this being the case, things are about to get real crazy. For the average person. They're talking about 18 months worth of blackouts. Okay. All right. The average person's not ready, especially Jake. They ain't ready for 18 months worth of blackouts. All right. No electricity, no power for 18 months. And for them to say, to give a date, let you know that it's all orchestrated. All right. It's all orchestrated. Let me grab Ecclesiastes 12. Okay. Which this is what to be expecting in these days coming up, man. Okay? Because eventually in the video, certain videos, them going into the ramifications and the consequences that's going to be apparent, because of, the actions of the White House, of Donald Trump, with these tariffs and these sanctions, economic D-Day and whatnot, and this trade war they got with Canada that he just sparked up again, as I mentioned earlier. That's going to cause the price of, diesel, to become more expensive, which if that happens, actually when that happens, you're not going to have, the abundance of materials and raw goods headed to these stores that, like people are accustomed to having. Things is eventually gonna halt. And I remember coming into the truth, years ago, and one of the major things are important things that I remember the apostles talking about. Apostle Tahar, he had mentioned that when you see trucks, stop moving, that's when America's done, because that's the diesel trucks is the veins and the blood that pumps through the veins of Babylon the Great. So if you got these diesel trucks that can't afford gas, and or there is no gas, okay, you're not gonna get certain supplies, certain goods. So those days is around the corner, man. All right, so this is Ecclesiastes 12 and verse 1. It says, "Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them." All right, so you're supposed to be seeking Yahweh Shem Yahushai when you're in your youth, when you're healthy. Okay? While the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain, In the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, and the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those that look out of the windows be darkened. And that's what we are witnessing right now. Okay? You're seeing the keepers of the house trembling, you know, pertaining to the economy, the U.S. economy. Don't none of them bastards in those positions of power know what the hell they're doing. You know, buying back bonds, secondary tariffs, trade war with Canada. What the hell is y'all doing? but all that is to make America great again. Bullshit, man. All right. It says, and the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those that look out of the windows be darkened. So jobs is hard to come by. There's not an abundance of jobs like it once was. In one of the interviews I recently looked at, they had said that America's unemployment rate is now at 24%, which 29.4 or 24.9. I forget which one it was, but they was even saying that those numbers is cooked. You know, those ain't even actual numbers of the real unemployment rate here in America. Okay. It says, and those that look out of the windows be darkened. All right. So all this forecasting that these individuals that work in Wall Street, and this economist, and this president, and all these different individuals trying to forecast what they see America's future looking like, they're all wrong. Okay, because in an interview I looked at earlier, it was mentioned that the U.S. wasn't supposed to hit $40 trillion worth of debt until January of 2027, which is about 4 or 5 months away. About 5 months away, So they're 6 months early as far as hitting that 40 trillion, because they just hit the U.S. Debt just hit $40 trillion. Excuse me. Okay, which wasn't supposed to happen until next year. So this place is done, man. America's cooked. All right. Okay. America's cooked. All right, you just heard it right there. All right. Let me see, verse 4 says, and the doors shall be shut in the streets when the sound of the grinding is low, and he shall rise up at the voice of the bird, and all the daughters of music shall be brought low. All right, so in the days to come, people's main concern is going to be survival. How do we eat? How do we, pretty much survive? That's the people in Gary, Indiana, that don't have any electricity. They ain't worried about Instagram and social media, and even though social media is heavily intertwined with just regular life, all right, but people ain't worried about the alternate world, so to say. All right, the fictitious world, their personality that can be found online, because that's all social media is. It gives you the opportunity to become somebody else, to have a alter ego. Okay, so people that's in Gary, Indiana, going on 2 weeks without food and water, electricity, light, warmth, and what have you, they're not concerned about dumb shit. They're concerned about how they gonna survive, how they gonna eat. Okay, and luckily for them, it's you know, the summertime. We're approaching the end of summer, but luckily for them, it's the summertime. You know, but you know, I just wanted to bring that out, man. All right, so uh, what the U.S. is doing is causing uh these nations, because one thing Scott Bessent had said as well was that pretty much he was getting nations up out of using the dollar. You know, if you want to side with Iran, well, you can't be part of the dollar program, so to say. You got to find another currency to use and make your reserve currency and whatnot. Not necessarily in those terms that he said that, but that's what he was getting at. So that in itself got these nations like, whew, thank you, man. We tired of fucking being pigeonholed by using this goddamn dollar. Gladly, we opt out. We going over here to BRICS. You know, so things about to become like real interesting, man. Real interesting to see what the Lord's gonna do with this situation. All right, and Thawada Yahbashim Yahushua, we got, you know, prophecy to you know, as a reference point, you know, to point us in the direction of where we know these situations is going to turn and head, you know. But, you know, this whole interview is good. As you see, I only made it through 7 minutes of it. But very, very, very informative and good interview. So I'm going to wrap it up with that. You know, expect to see, you know, this economy collapse fast, man. Matter of fact, let me grab that before I wrap up. Luke 10 and 18. And this is what the Lord said. Yahweh Shai. All right. Luke 10 and 18, it says, and he said unto me, and he said unto them, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. Okay. So when Esau falls, it's going to be quick. Okay. It's going to be quick. Look at all this war has only been since 2025. You had, you know, Iran and the U.S. go at it for about 2 weeks or something like that. But at the beginning of this year in February, everything that has happened since from February to now, it's been a lot of things take place war-wise, and even, you know, dealing with certain economies. There's been a lot of things that have taken place that's greatly affected the average person. All right, gas prices in particular. Okay, so, you know, Esau about to fall, man, about to fall, quick as hell, and they're not ready for it. All right, and it's a beautiful thing to witness, having hope in the salvation of Yahweh Shem Yahushai. All right, so, you know, I'm gonna wrap it up with that. Lord willing, this was an edifying lesson. Until next time, I say shalom.